Well, good morning, church family. It's great to be with you today, whether we're meeting virtually or whether you're meeting with us live or however you're meeting with us. It's so good to be together in God's presence, in His Word, worshiping His name. And so it's just a blessing. I'm glad you're with us today. You know, last week I had the opportunity of taking a vacation to Colorado, and, you know, I am so grateful to Pastor Aaron Allison for filling in for me last week while I was hiking in the mountains of Colorado. By the way, high temp of 75 degrees. I just wanted to let all my Texas peeps know that while they were melting in the 105 degree weather. You know, anyway, Aaron is such a great friend, a dear friend. And when he heard that I was planning on preaching and doing the video recording while I was on vacation, he said, no, Brent. You take a break, enjoy your family, relax. He said he'd take care of the sermon, and you know he did, and he did such a great job, and it was so appreciated. So I just want to shout out a big blessing on Pastor Aaron Allison and CIL Church there in Hendersonville, Tennessee. We love you guys. We appreciate you guys. We're praying for you guys. You know, well, speaking of hiking in the mountains, you know, I'm not so sure that was very relaxing, to be honest. It's hard work. It takes a lot out of you, you know, especially when you're carrying some extra weight around. You got a few extra pounds trying to go up that mountain. There's probably a sermon in there somewhere, I'm sure, perhaps another time. But you know what I found is that the work and the sweat and the huffing and the puffing, it's worth it. Because along the way, there are these amazing views and these places where you can stop and get a drink of water out of your backpack and just enjoy the beauty of God's creation. And then at the top of this particular trail that we go to, there's these amazing waterfalls up there. And man, such a blessing to be able to see that and share that view and that hiking experience with my family. We even took little Bryn with us, 9 months old, all strapped up. She's going up the mountain. My 79-year-old father, he went up the mountain. And we went up there together and enjoyed that together. And it was so worth it. But you know, while I was doing this, I couldn't help but think that there are many times in our spiritual lives when we feel like we're on this hard uphill climb. Maybe seasons where we feel like that. There are times we just feel like we can't go on. And we maybe even ask the question, man, is this worth it? Can I just tell you that I've had moments like that on the hike, and I've had moments like that in life. And you know, when I would feel that way on the hike, I'd get tempted to just quit. I'd be tempted to go back down and to the bottom. And you know, nothing helped me during times like that, like a short breather and just stopping and taking in the view. Maybe getting a drink of water, just taking a deep breath, getting my air back, my wind back. But you know what helped the most? The encouragement of other people. When the ones that you're hiking with, you know, they're like, hey, Brent, you okay? Hang in there. You know, we're getting close. But even better sometimes was when people were on their way down that had already been to the top. They're saying, hey, you got 10 more minutes. You're almost there. It's so beautiful. Keep going. It's worth it. I can guarantee you that if I were hiking alone, man, I would have turned back. That encouragement was everything. And some of you may be in that spot right now where this season has seemed like an uphill challenge for you. And you may be right now feeling a bit weary. You may be coming in this morning spiritually tired, emotionally exhausted. And you know what I want? I want to be one of those encouragers today for you. I want this time in the Lord this morning to be one of those stop, breathe, and take a drink of water moments. You know, where your spirit is refreshed and your strength is renewed and you are encouraged today to continue your journey of faith. You know, I think about Psalm 121, and starting in verse 1, because there's a psalmist, and he's looking up at these mountains. And here's what he says. I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? And I get this picture that he was looking up that mountain and he was asking, how in the world am I going to get to the top of that? How am I going to get over that? How am I going to overcome that? How am I going to make it? I need some help. Now, the answer to his how am I going to make it, where's my help coming from question is immediately answered. As the psalmist goes on, he says, my help comes from you, Lord, maker of heaven, creator of the earth. You know, beloved, our help comes from the one who is all-powerful. He's almighty. He's all-knowing. He sees the whole mountain, every trail, every obstacle. And he's able to get us through it or take us over it. And beloved, if he so chooses, he can even remove the whole mountain because he's the maker of heaven, the creator of the whole world, and the mover of all mountains. So I just want you to take a moment and take a drink of the water of his word today. Take a deep breath of his spirit and be encouraged with Psalm 121. I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Behold, he who watches over you will not slumber or sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade. Some of you need some shade today. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun's not going to harm you by day, the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and your going, both now and forevermore. Boy, that's like a drink of fresh water, a breath of fresh air. It encourages me. Okay? Well, let's hike. Let's continue to go forward. You know, we're going to jump in today where we left off a couple of weeks ago in Exodus chapter 2. And we've been looking at the life of Moses. And specifically how God was working in his life to bring about this man who would ultimately be used by God to be the instrument of his deliverance for the people of Israel. Moses had a call in his life, and God was preparing him for what he had called him to do. And the people of Israel were in harsh slavery, and God was raising up a deliverer to deliver them from the harsh slavery. And it was this guy, Moses. But here's the deal. As great as that plan is and was, when we left off in Exodus chapter 2, that plan didn't seem to be going very well. You know, sometimes in our life, even though God has a plan, sometimes things don't seem to be going very well. And it wasn't really going very well for Moses. I mean, when we left off with Moses, God's hero, is on the run. He was a wanted man. He had killed a guy, and he had hit him in the sand. I mean, wow, that's not a really good start for a guy that was destined to be a hero, God's hero. Now, certainly at this point in his story, he's not seeming like a good guy at all. We're going to start in Exodus 2:15. It says, out of fear, Moses fled from Pharaoh. He fled. That's the first verb in that sentence. He fled from Pharaoh, and then he went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. You know, I want to stop here for just a moment. I want to talk about today this well and what happens here at this well. How Moses comes to this well. And I'll be honest, when I was first working on this whole series about Moses, this particular passage wasn't something that really kind of jumped off the page, honestly. It just, but yet I sensed in my spirit, man, that I was just kind of prompted to hit the brakes for a moment and pay a little closer attention to this. I mean, this little thing here in the middle of chapter 2 is just a little blip of a story, and it's nestled in between some really big action moments. I mean, big drama. Baby in the basket, being put in the Nile River, Pharaoh's daughter finding him. Then later, Moses kills this guy, hides him in the sand. I mean, that's action, right? That's good stuff. In chapter 3, the burning bush is just around the corner, and then there's the 10 plagues and the parting of the Red Sea. And so this little part of Moses' story is an easy skip over. But there's something here that I believe that God really prompted me to stop and look at. And I believe that's because there are many of us that can relate to this part of the story. And just like Moses, we need to stop at a well and receive from the Lord. So here we have Moses, and he's on his own version of his uphill climb story. Kind of like I was talking about the mountains earlier. He's on this uphill climb moment, and it's hard, it's challenging. I mean, he's been rejected by his own people, the Hebrews. He's running from the Egyptians, and in his heart, he had to feel like an abject failure. And so what did he do about that? Well, he ran. He ran from his past. He ran from who he was. He ran from what he felt called to do. We know from in the book of Acts that he felt like that he was called to be a deliverer. He ran from that, though. He ran from the place of his calling, and he ran. You know, sometimes it just seems easier when you've screwed up to just run and hide. I mean, doesn't it? I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of the human condition from the very beginning. I mean, Adam and Eve, when they blew it, what did they do? Well, they tried to cover it up, tried to hide it behind fig leaves, like Moses tried to hide it in the sand, and then they hid. They ran from God. And I'll be honest, I get it. I mean, have you ever been there where it just seems like you're running from the things of God? Perhaps you're running from a mistake. You're giving up on your calling. You're giving up. You're giving in. Have you ever been there? I have. I mean, I've wanted to run before. I hate the feeling of failure. I hate the shame of it, the guilt of it. It's awful. I'll share this with you. Several years ago, our church went through some really rough times. I mean, some rough days. And during that time, a lot of people left the church, and I mean, there were just all kinds of things just being said. And man, I'm going to be straight with you. You know, whether it was true or not, I felt like a total failure as a leader. I mean, I just feel like God had given me this ball and I had fumbled it. And you know what? Just like Moses, I wanted to bury it all, and I wanted to run. I mean, in fact, in some ways I did run. I mean, obviously I didn't run physically. I'm still here. But I ran in here. And I'm going to tell you why I ran. I ran because of hurt. I ran because of disappointment. I ran because of shame. I ran because I just didn't want to deal with it. Same reason that lots of people run from a situation that maybe represents failure to them. And just like Moses, when I ran, I found myself at a well. I found myself at a place of a refreshing encounter with God, a place where God began to turn some things around in me, a place where God began to heal, a place where I discovered some new beginnings. And Moses is going to discover some new beginnings at this well. He doesn't know it yet. He just thinks he's taking a rest. He just thinks he's taking a break. But God is on the move, and he's going to do some things, and he's going to encounter Moses in disguise at this well. Now, some of you may be in need of that right now. You need a God encounter. And if that is you, I want to invite you to just stop a moment and wait. Wait here. At the well of God's word, at the well of God's presence. Now, I'm going to get more specific, talk about that more specifically in a moment, about the well. But what I want to get back to Moses, because I think there's some things that maybe we can identify with and connect with. He's here stopping at this well, and he's stopping to rest, to get a breather, to get a drink. That's where people went in that day. It was the watering hole. They went to the well to get water. And he's there to gather his thoughts. And while he's there, he's taking a break. I'm sure he's waiting for next. What now? I mean, he's a fugitive from Egypt. He can't go back there. And from all appearances, he's a fugitive from God's call on his life to deliver God's people from slavery. He's on the run. He's far from Egypt. But in his heart, he's probably either even further from God than he is from Egypt. And he's further from the call of God on his life, maybe in his mind, in his heart, than ever before. I would imagine that as he's there waiting at the well, he's probably considering what his next move is. Now what? What do I do now? Man, I've really messed things up. I mean, maybe he's regretting his choices that brought him to this place. Now, who knows exactly what his thoughts were, but I'm sure they were something like that. And he was having this, now what do I do moment. Because his story has taken a huge twist. It doesn't seem like it's going the way it was supposed to go. I mean, we read the whole story with hindsight, but if you're in the middle of the story, if you hadn't read the story before, it's easy to kind of think that you figured out the narrative. I mean, if you follow the story at all, before Moses goes AWOL, you have to be thinking, oh, okay, I see how God's going to deliver his people. What a cool plan. I mean, he's rescuing Moses from death as a baby, and at the same time, the Pharaoh's daughter of all people finds him and rescues him. So now Moses is going to grow up in the palace, and he's going to grow up and he's going to have authority when he's older. Maybe he might even be the next Pharaoh. And then he's going to use his authority to set God's people free. Yay! Cool. Makes perfect sense. Great story. Except it doesn't happen that way. That's not how the story goes. Instead, the narrative goes offline from the expected. I mean, doesn't it? Moses does grow up in the palace, just like it was supposed to start. But then he refuses to identify with the royal family. Then he throws away his power and position. And Moses has this huge, miserable failure as a deliverer in his first attempt. I mean, granted, it was an attempt that was ill-conceived and rushed and impulsive, didn't have a hint of God on it, because isn't it true that sometimes we just get way ahead of what God is wanting to do and make a mess of things? I want you to remember that Scripture tells us that Moses supposed that his Hebrew relatives would see him as a leader, and they would make him a hero, and they would get behind him, and perhaps he could start some kind of revolution or something. So he ends up going on this one-man hero crusade, and he ends up killing an Egyptian, and then he completely miscalculated the response that the Hebrews would have with him, and he gets rejected by them right out of the gate, by his own people. They're saying things like, who put you in charge over us? You're just a murderer. And now on top of all of that, he's wanted dead by the Pharaoh. I mean, what a detour. This didn't feel like the way the story was supposed to go. Just to get back to where we started at the beginning of the story. I mean, think about it. The story starts with him being hidden from a death sentence. And now 40 years later, he's back to hiding from a death sentence. It was like one big 40-year circle. Some people may feel like that right now, that you're just going in this big circle and you're like wondering what in the world is going on. Well, can I just tell you that in that big circle, a lot was going on. That chapter, that 40-year chapter of his life didn't end until Moses had received everything that God wanted him to receive in that 40-year chapter of his life. I mean, he had received a world-class education, which he would not have had as a slave. He received top-flight leadership training, military training, experience. He learned the inner workings of Egyptian polity, which was going to come in handy when he ended up doing his ultimate mission in chapter 3 of his story. And God, in his sovereignty, had put Moses smack dab in the middle of that experience, because no way does Moses have those experiences without God's hand being in the middle of it. You know, have you ever felt like the story of your life jumped the tracks, took a detour, perhaps because of a mistake that you made, or perhaps a mistake that someone else made? Or maybe it was a circumstance or a situation that just seemed to come out of nowhere and knocked you off course. Or at least what you thought was the course, what you thought was the plan. And now you may find yourself asking, now what? What do I do now? Well, I want you to notice that the passage says that he went to live in Midian. In other words, in his mind, he's tending to live as a fugitive. He's intending to live in hiding, to live in his mistake. But God's not done with Moses just because Moses blew it. I want you to have no doubt that God's eye was on Moses. And I want you to have no doubt that God's eye is on you. That his call was on Moses, and his call is on you. And whether Moses or you believe it or not, whether you or Moses see it or saw it or not, God sees you. And he not only comes to this well in need of refreshment, but he is also in need of revelation. He needs some direction. He needs an answer. And in many ways, he needs some restoration. He has come to this well tired, confused, guilty, fearful. Perhaps he's even come to this well depressed and angry. And I would ask you, how do you come to the well today? What's the condition, the state of your heart as you come to the well of God's presence today?